As you know, I love talking to people with unique, interesting, and sometimes harrowing jobs. I've talked to ER nurses, cops, chainsaw artists, rock and roll road managers, cruise ship entertainers. Today, I talk with Kevin Hazzard, who spent a decade as an EMT in Atlanta. Kevin is the author of A Thousand Naked Strangers, a paramedic's wild ride to the edge and back, which has been described as mordantly funny account of his decade spent as a first responder. I have got a million questions for this guy, so let's get to it. Please welcome Kevin Hazzard. Kevin, thanks for being our fresh face in hell this week.
Jonathan, good to be here.
Yeah, well, I want to start at the beginning of your EMT journey. EMT or EMS? Help me out. One's a technician and one's were you an EMT?
Yeah. So EMS is the overall industry. EMT is one of the jobs. So an EMT would be level 1, paramedic would be level 2. So I started as an EMT and then went back to school and became a paramedic.
Okay, so I'll refer to you no longer as an EMT. If I do, it's a mistake. And no disrespect intended. I didn't know how the hierarchy worked. So we're just calling you a paramedic. So you were, this was an interesting, you were a failed salesman in Atlanta. What were you selling?
Oh, God. So it was like right around Y2K. If you can even, I mean, it seems like it's like the Depression bringing up Y2K at this point. But there was a software program that was made to supposedly die when we hit midnight in the year 2000. Remember that crazy thing where all the numbers were going to revert to
right? I had high hopes, dude. I collected a bunch of cans and some bottled water, and then nothing happened. I was bummed.
Everybody had gold and bullets they were hiding in the hill. So that's what I was doing. I was working for a company that sold a patch for the Y2K meltdown. And we were supposed to call all of the clients and bring it. I mean, I was just horrible. I was horrible. I just couldn't do it. I didn't like it. I was embarrassed. I don't like to be sold to. So I was insanely uncomfortable selling to someone else. I used to like call people when they would answer to hang up because they recorded how many phone calls you made. And so the minute someone would hang up or pick up, I would just hang up. And that way it would get charted as a call. So they thought I was working.
Look, dude, I'm a savant. I hate it. I hate selling, but I'm a savant. I was in Silicon Valley in the 80s when you could still be a telemarketer. People didn't necessarily hang up to you. I had to telemarket sunglasses, dude. That's not easy. I think they look good on you. They're black. Well, anyway, so the story is you're a failed salesman in Atlanta. And then after 911, you felt something was missing for your life. You decided to go to a new direction. So walk us through this life change.
So by the time 9/11 happens, I'm working as a reporter covering local news in Atlanta. And, it's just not terribly exciting, especially when you're young and you feel like you should be out taking on the world. And 9/11 happens. I have friends who are in the military. They're suddenly off all over the world. They're doing these crazy things. And I'm at home, and I wrote an article about speed bumps, about like how much asphalt goes into the speed. It's dentistry at a certain point, and that's how. And I was like, man, this is horrible. What am I going to do? What can I do to be, what is my path to this greater thing happening all around me? And one night, I got sent out by my editor to a tunnel collapse. They were making this massive wastewater project in Northwest Atlanta. And I mean, this hole was gargantuan. I mean, it was hundreds of meters wide, hundreds of meters deep. And this crew is working halfway down and their scaffolding collapses. And they just disappear into the earth. And so the county's high-angle technical rescue team gets called out. And, I get there and I watch them rappel over the side. The family begins to arrive. They set up this vigil. Very quickly, it becomes clear that the only thing coming out of this hole is going to be bodies. So these people are, distraught. And I'm 23, maybe, and I'm standing next to this. And this felt like touching something much, much larger than anything I'd ever been a part of. And up comes this crew of firefighters. And, I didn't know what they did. I didn't know what they were doing down there. I didn't know how to become one of them. But there's something in the way they carried themselves in this moment. It was like this.
It's almost like you're a little kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is interesting. Help me. You were what, mid-20s now, mid-30s? How old were you?
No, I'm like 23 years old.
Oh, okay. So because you had the way you're talking about it has this sort of childlike, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
like,
it was that, but it was also everybody was so horrified by what was happening, and the only people who were calm and seemed to know what to do were these guys. You know what I mean? And, like, the fact that they knew how to handle a situation that most of us can't even begin to wrap our heads around. I just thought, I don't know what that is, but I wanna be a part of that.
wow. So do you feel like did you feel when intuitively you recognize, like, that potential in yourself? Like, you're somebody
Oh,
who could
no.
stay calm and you
No.
just like, "That's cool, I wanna do it."
Yeah, I had no I had one brush with an emergency. um, I panicked. I was a tour guide in Charleston in the summers in college. I was leading these jet ski tours. 2 guys crash into each other. One literally gets his, like, from below the nose down, his face is, like, gone. He's floating in 90 feet of ocean water. We're 2 miles from land. Like, I am panicking, and thankfully, there happened to be a doctor motoring by in his boat. He pulled
Oh my
over and
god.
called the Coast Guard and saved us, but in the brief time that I was in charge of that particular emergency, I did not show a tendency to be able to handle it.
So fast forward, you become a first responder, and now all
Mm.
of a sudden you're being I've been to Atlanta. It's been a not a frequent tour spot, but I was also down there when we shot the film. I've been there about 4 or 5 times. There's some rough neighborhoods in Atlanta, and you were suddenly being dispatched into some of the rougher neighborhoods in Atlanta, or
Yeah.
I'm curious, I had to ask you this, if you've ever read Shannon Burke's amazing, dark, unforgettable novel, Black Flies, based on his, experiences in EMT in Harlem?
I have not read that one. I've read Bringing Out the Dead, but I'm familiar with Black Flies. I haven't read it.
Yeah, it's amazing. So his account is very dark. He describes an almost suffocating, sort of pervasive cynicism that develops among some of his colleagues
Right.
who come to objectify human life to the point of disdain. And was this your experience at all? Did you find yourself being desensitized to the violence and trauma that surrounded you daily?
I mean, there's plenty of people who do that. I was not I never became cynical in that regard, but it does become, and I think this is necessary to a certain degree, it does become a bit mechanical. You know, Somebody hands you a child who's not breathing. By any measure, you should panic. You know what I mean? That is as bad a moment as it can come. So for you to walk into that with all the emotions that we expect someone to bring to a dying child, you aren't going to be able to perform the way you ought to. So at some point, it has to become plumbing. It has to be, there is a problem in the pipes, and I've got to go in and figure out what it is and fix it. And that's how you have to look at it. And that's, I always felt like, look, that's what the parents would want. They do not want someone coming in emotional.
Right.
And so to a degree, you have to find that switch within yourself to say, this is not a kid. This is not somebody's husband. Um, this is simply a problem that I've been put here to fix. The problem there, as you're suggesting, like, the tendency is then for that just to continue, and then, like, it's really hard to remain sensitive to people's emotional needs when you are so cut off to the larger psychological issue that's happening around you.
Out of
It does wear
necessity.
you
So
down.
it's basically what you're describing as a sort of emotional compartmentalization.
Yeah.
You can compartmentalize so long. I mean, at some point, does it, once you're off the clock, talk to me about, like, is there a psychological toll? I mean, how do you preserve your humanity when you're faced continually with grisly circumstances and you're continually forced to compartmentalize them in such a way that that it's plumbing?
I don't I think you some of it just gets lost. I think that's the reality. If you pulled anyone aside and asked them who's done this job for any length of time, and you ask them that exact question, I think everybody would say, "Oh, well, a certain part of you has to be lost along the way. A certain part of you has to be cut off along the way." It doesn't mean you have to become, something out of a movie where you're dark and you're miserable and you're angry and you're bitter and cynical. But, that's where that gallows humor, I think, so, like, that is an attempt to bring back a more human side to this thing, to be able to laugh at some of this, because you do have to break it off. I mean, I'll never forget, I was having dinner with my wife and my mother, of, like, 2 people maybe you don't make this joke to, And I had just that afternoon run a call in the highway. And it's like the most dangerous thing you're going to do is run a call in the highway because nobody's paying attention. People are like talking to each other. They're fighting with each other. They're on their phone. They're looking at their map. Like they're doing everything but looking at the road. And there you are, just like standing in the middle of the street at some car wreck. So this car whizzes by, I mean, misses me by inches. And this is like 20 years ago, mid 2000s. So that was when Volkswagen had come out with a Beetle that had this sort of matching flower vase that attached to the console. So if you got the lime green Beetle, it would be a lime green flower or purple or whatever. And I remember thinking to myself, can you imagine being smeared on the highway by a Volkswagen Beetle with a matching flower in its dashboard? And that night I asked and so now the thought's in my head. And so that night I'm at dinner, mom, wife, and I said, what kind of car would you least want to be hit by? And they both sort of stopped eating and just turned to me. And to me, it was a perfectly reasonable question because it had been in my head all day. Like, if that's the car you don't want to be hit by, like, which one would you want to be hit by? And so I just couldn't get this out of my head. And so I asked them, like, which car would be the most insulting car to be flattened by on the highway? And so, my wife was like, dude, what do you, like, what? Like, that's not a thing that people talk about. So that is sort of one of those perfect examples of it's a thing that you do in the job. It's a thing that seems reasonable, a thing that you and your coworkers might talk about, but which in reality just isn't that normal, but it is a product of being around, a 23-year-old's not supposed to learn about the world by watching people around him die. Or being called out to a shooting or a choking or births. I've delivered God knows how many babies long before I ever had a child myself. It's a weird way to learn about the world, and it does leave a strange dent.
Yeah, and the gallows sense of humor seems like a prerequisite to me. I mean, I know 3 or 4 EMTs personally, or, paramedics. Now I don't know what level they're at. I would imagine my friend Dave is a paramedic because he's delivered like 15 babies, been doing it for 25 years, but they do all have a sense of humor. And I mean, when we talked to Lexi, who is an ER nurse, she had a similar thing. She talked about the way her and her colleagues were trauma bonded. So like this language that you're talking about, this morbid sense of humor, um, I, I don't, how could you do it without it? I mean, did you ever meet a paramedic that didn't have it? Because it seemed like if he didn't, then he would be, categorically unqualified almost.
No, nobody who stuck around. There were some people who didn't have the sense of humor and took things way too seriously. They burn out very quickly. Almost everybody that is going to be around for any amount of time has it. I mean, that's just what, I don't think there's any other way to do it.
In your book, you often speak about looking for the perfect call.
Mm.
Can you explain to us what that means when you say looking for the perfect call?
Yeah. So, you got to start out by understanding that, for a doctor, a nurse, a paramedic, all of us understand and accept the fact that not every one of our patients is going to survive. In fact, a lot of them won't. So, whether or not somebody survives, like, it's something you take personally, but it's not something that like you really carry with you because a lot of that's beyond your control. However, how you performed in that moment, did that person die because you were not up to it that day? That would be something to take personally. Or did everything go absolutely perfectly in an absolutely horrible situation and the person died anyway? However, they died with as much dignity as possible. That's something to take pride in. You know what I'm saying? So
Okay.
the patient's outcome kind of becomes to a certain degree, beside the point because it's really in their moment, did I do what they would have wanted me to do? And then, so in that context now back it up to someone who's been doing this job for a number of years, has been trained to do all these things. And somebody says to you, hey, today someone is going to slip and fall. They're going to fall off a building. They're going to be shot. They're going to explode. I mean, people explode. Like crazy things happen in the world. It's going to happen. Someone is going to get called out to that. Do you want to be the person who gets called out to that? It's not wishing it into existence. It's simply saying, if it's going to happen, I want to be the one who gets there. And then, so we say, okay, so something insane's going to happen. We're going to be the ones who get sent out to it. What would make this call incredible? Well, what would make it incredible is that we have to, like, the outcome of the patient requires us to do all kinds of, it can't just be like we pick them up and we race them to the hospital. There's got to be medicine that we're doing and, skills that we're doing. And we're
You want
actually,
to be the hero a little bit. It's
yeah,
all right. You can say it.
we are actively involved in their rescue. And, and so then there's like, so what are the factors that would come in? And so obviously, trauma, we would want some element of fun, but it can't be too much trauma because then it's just all surgeons. So there's got to be a medical component, and it has to be something kind of like a little bit high wired, a little bit crazy to make it stand out from what we did yesterday and what we'll do tomorrow. And so we sort of compiled this big list of all these things that would have to come together to make the perfect call, which is essentially something really difficult, something total, like one of those stories that you will be telling for the next 15 years, and with lives on the line. And then my partner turned to me at one point. He was like, well, you bring up a good point. Does it matter if the patient lives? And that became this sort of philosophical conversation that went back and forth between two of us about if so much of it is beyond your control, how much of your self-worth do you hang on the outcome?
Wow. It would seem like they'd have to survive. You'd have to save them for it to be like, I mean, it can't just, that's crazy. That,
You say that, but then, again, when you realize how little control over some of that, it becomes a really interesting question to consider.
yeah, no, I'm interested. I'm trying to put myself there. Like,
Yeah.
so, I mean, did you come close to the perfect call? Can you give me we love stories and I know you've got them. So what are some of the stories that you've been telling, some of the near perfect calls, or if you in fact did achieve the perfect call?
There's a couple that come to mind. That particular guy, he and I ran a call one evening. It came out as a shooting. It was about 2 minutes from where we were, about 20 minutes from where anybody else was. So we knew it was just going to be us. So we race out there, we pull up, and it's at this gas station. It had been a high school dance. All these kids got out of the dance. 2 different schools were at the dance. So it's like groups of guys who didn't know each other with a single pool of girls in the middle of them. Fight breaks out, shooting happens. As we're walking across this gas station parking lot, I just remember crunching shell casings with every step. I mean, I don't know how many bullets were fired, but it was unbelievable how many shell casings were on the ground.
And you have no idea if it's still a live shooting scene or whatever. Like, I mean,
no, I don't.
Arriving so close to the.
Yeah, I don't.
So, I mean, are you ducking or you running towards the victim? Like, how you have to decide? I'm starting to see like, okay, there's some pretty big decisions you got to make here.
Yep, don't actively hear the shooting, but I also don't know where the shooter is. There's a police helicopter or the cops are not yet there, but the police helicopter is there. So there's this rotor that's kicking everything up into a panic. The stuff's flying everywhere, super loud. We can hear sirens screaming in from every direction. And the first thing we see when we arrive is there's this kid who's sitting on the curb, and his eyes are, I mean, giant. He's like the size of apples. And he's been shot through the upper lip, like right through his hard palate. So he's kind of sitting there looking at us, and he's alert, but he can't really breathe because most of his mouth has been like ripped apart by this bullet. So like in terms of like perfect call, now here we are. Not only is this a big trauma call, but this kid's going to require a lot of work from us. We're going to have to keep his airway open. So immediately we're on him. We're trying to suction him, and my partner looks at me and he goes, "Is he the only one? Because there's a shitload of bullets here." And so I turn around, and this other kid comes sort of wandering over to me. And he's kind of holding on to his stomach, and he's like, "Man, I think I've been shot too." I'm like, all right. So we get him. We're on the radio saying, "Hey, is anybody else coming?" And the next nearest ambulance is still 9-10 minutes away.
And there's just 2 of you, correct?
There's just the 2 of us. Now we have 2 patients. And so I'm looking around, and now there's like cops are flying into every corner of this gas station. And this third kid wanders over, huge, enormous kid, 6'4", 300 pounds. He's this just giant human. And he's real quiet. He just kind of walks over, and I said, "Who are you?" And he goes, "I'm the friend." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I said, what do we need to do? And he said, "I need to go." And I was like, "All right, in you go." And I'm not sure what's going on with him. I don't know. It's very rare that someone sort of volunteers to get in the ambulance. So let's go. So now he says, he hops in. So my partner's in the back. I looked at him and I said, "Are you good?" Because he's got this patient with a bullet in his mouth, no airway. He's got a patient with a bullet in his gut, which means he's probably going to be bleeding out very quickly. And then he's got this other patient, this third guy, who's a complete mystery, and we don't know what to do with. And he said, yeah,
No,
just
you
go.
haven't found any signs of a gunshot wound or anything.
No, and we don't really have enough people at this point. What we should be doing is like cutting off his shirt and his pants to expose him to see what's what. But we don't have the ability to do that because we just don't have the hands. And we know that the kid with the gun and the gunshot in the mouth, his clock is ticking. The kid with the gunshot in the gut, his clock is ticking. So there's no time to really investigate this third kid. So we're on the road. And the ambulance that we had this sort of open door between the front and the back. So I can anytime jump out and look. So he's suctioning this kid out, trying to, the one with the shot in the mouth, trying to keep him going. He's got to keep him elevated because there's so much blood coming out. He's trying to get IV started on the kid with the gunshot in the gut so he can kind of keep his blood pressure up. And then this big kid who's sitting on the bench, we get halfway there and he starts doing this thing with his hands. He's like, hey, man, I don't know, man. I don't know. And my partner's like, dude, I think you're going to have to get back here. Like, I don't know. I don't want to lose someone because we just didn't have time to look at him. And
he looks like he's going to pass out. So he's in
shock. He looks like he was going to crash. And so I jump out and I look in the bag. I, crawl through that little hole in the bag and I lean him forward. And when I do, I see this blood spot on the wall behind him, which is like right at kidney height. And there are a few places you don't want to get shot. And the kidney's like way, way, way up on that list because it's this insanely vascular organ that does so much for you. So a gunshot in the kidney can bleed a lot. And a guy this big is a large volume of blood. So like for him to be saying, for like the blood to be draining out of his head, you're talking about a massive amount of blood that's probably sitting in his gut right now. And we're both kind of like, holy crap, are you kidding me? So he's like, you better just go. So we fly to the hospital. We call them. They've got surgeons sitting at the door. We come in. He's intubating. He's putting a tube down the guy's throat who was shot in the face. We got surgeons picking up the dude with the gut shot. We got surgeon picking up the dude with the kidney shot. We have oral surgery coming in to pick up this kid in the front. Like everybody, it was the craziest, most hectic thing. We get everybody off to surgery, and then we're sitting around afterward, just like talking to each other. We're standing outside this ambulance, it's full of blood. I mean, wall to wall, stuff everywhere. And it had been like maybe 15 minutes since we got that call. And all
the other people were 10 or 20 minutes out and they never even got there. So
nobody ever made it. It was this insane thing. And it was like two people who had been working together for 2 years and were in perfect sync, and everything we did was just kind of in perfect harmony. And he was doing what he needed to do, and I was doing what I needed to do. And everybody got sort of whisked off to surgery. And the thing about hospitals is like healthcare is a vast and raging ocean. The moment your patient slips into it, they disappear. And I used to make the joke that like somebody would have to have been covered with feathers, lit on fire, and then blown up for anyone to remember tomorrow that they arrived in the ER today. The nurses, the doctors, they are too busy. Like your patient would have to be like so unbelievably, like it would have to be such a fantastic circumstance for them to remember. So we have no idea what happened to those three kids after we dropped them off and they disappeared. But that was one of those circumstances where you turn around and you go, all right, like I'm not certain what the perfect call is, but to have this very hectic shooting scene with dozens of kids running all over the place screaming, the cops not there yet, helicopter swooping in over our head, bullet casings everywhere, patients literally walking up to us going, hey, I think I've been shot. And for us to get them picked up and delivered to surgeons in under 15 minutes, that was one of those moments where you think, all right, that's about as close to perfect as it's going to get.
And now I completely understand the concept, which is that it's the perfect call is kind of the perfect performance, the perfect orchestration, the perfect, like if I'm getting it straight, and I was riveted to that story, if I'm getting it straight, both of you drove at some point, right? Because weren't you driving, then you had to sort of, and then he went forward to drive. I mean, like, so that's what it's about. It's like this perfect, and how much of that would have been possible had this guy not been your partner for a long time? I mean, how much of that, I'm starting to think in terms of team building and like, like how important was that could you have done that perfect call with some green EMS or maybe somebody you didn't know as well? Or was part of it being so well orchestrated was that you guys could, like, have this sort of preternatural communication with each other, like
So much of it is music. So much of it is music,
Yeah.
and you can't play together the first time that you pick up instruments. And so a lot of it comes down to knowing, "Hey, I know what I'm good at, and you know what you're good at. We both know what we need to do to move quickly. So let's go ahead and just, let's you just do what you do, I'll do what I do." And there's a look that you get. There's a certain I know when you're getting flustered. I can tell by the way you act. I've been with you long enough. I can see it in your
Mhm.
face when you start to adjust your glasses a certain way. I need to step in and do another thing. And it was kind of like that moment with the third patient. We had been working, and one of the things that nobody tells you is your hands get really sweaty under a pair of gloves. And so he has been working on this kid with the face, and after he intubated him, he pulled his gloves off because they were covered in sweat, or excuse me, covered in blood. Now the problem is you can't get new gloves on because you cannot slip into rubber gloves with sweaty hands. It won't happen.
Then
You like they will be this high above your fingers. You'll be trying to pull them, it won't work. So he pulls the gloves off, and in that exact instant, mystery patient goes, "Whew, man, I'm not feeling good." So he realized, like, "Oh, wait a minute, we got another guy. I'm sitting here barehanded. Get back here." And so I just sort of jump in and there are just things that would be impossible with someone that you don't know very well. And I've been in those circumstances, and that's what I was talking about before. When if you're measuring yourself and you're including whether or not the patient lives, it has more to do with, did I do everything that I could have in the run up to them dying?
yeah, w
And
you
if
were
I
not
did,
were you not responsible for the death? I mean, it was
exactly,
inevitable.
exactly. Did I do everything that I could?
Okay, so I'm fascinated, and I don't wanna make you do all the heavy lifting, but I kinda do because that's what I enjoy. My job is best when I get to just listen to your stories. Give me let's take that was as close to the perfect call. Give me an example where just shit
Mm.
just went all wrong. Like, I mean, it may not even have been of a crazy situation, but, like, crazy stuff happened and things went wrong. Give me kind of more of a disaster scenario, worst kinda call.
Oh, well, so there's there's a couple different kinds of 'em. Honestly, the one that happens the most often, and it and this is what is so scary about the job, is that you know that you're gonna have to do this more and more. So you get these people who have congestive heart failure. Okay, so when your heart's not pumping very well, fluid eventually builds up in the lungs. It builds up in your whole body, but it will, when it gets to a really bad state, it will build up in your lungs. And these are often 300-400 pound people. They're inevitably just sort of, as a Murphy's Law thing, they're on the second floor, they're on the third floor, their house is smaller than small. It is a back bedroom. There's no way to get to them. And your partner weighs 108 pounds. And you walk through the door with this person who suddenly all this fluid is now built up into their lungs, which means they're quite literally drowning. So imagine you walk into a room. It's dark because this person does not have power. In the city of Atlanta, it's a little bit different now, but with public housing, the city paid for gas but not electricity. So oftentimes people would heat their house they would just open the stove, turn all the burners on, and turn the stove on high because the gas was free. And so the burners and stove would heat their house, and that would also be where their light came from. So a lot of times the houses would be dark. These little apartments would be dark. So you're going to the second floor apartment of this 400-pound man who's in a back bedroom, who's drowning in his own fluid. And you walk through the door and he's sitting up and his eyes are bulging out like this. And every breath, you can just hear the sort of gurgle. It's like he's blowing through a straw is what it sounds like. That bubbly sound that little kids make when they're blowing through a straw. And you cannot lay that person flat because whatever hope he has of surviving comes from him being upright, at least to keep the fluid down. So if you lay him back, he's instantly going to go out. But he's a massive person. He can't walk. You can't carry him because your partner's little. We get on the radio and we call for fire's help. Fire is oftentimes right there, but occasionally they're not. Occasionally they're 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes away. You cannot wait with this person. So you try to start moving them down the hallway. You try to get him to walk, but he can't walk. The more you move with that fluid in your lungs, the more the fluid gets inflamed. So they can't walk. So now you're in a hallway with him. He needs to be carried. So you sit him down on the floor and you're trying to pull him along. You try to lift him, try to go around the corner. And now there's this flight of stairs. inevitably, at some point along the way, he leans back. You can't stop him from leaning back. You're trying to pick him. Now he's panicking. Now imagine a 400-pound man is literally drowning.
Yeah.
Flailing, he's thrashing, he's sweating. Well, it's not really sweating, but the fluid is oozing out of his skin. So he's like wet and slippery. It's dark because there are no lights on in this house. You're trying to move him, and you get halfway, maybe a third of the way down the stairs, leans back, and he just.
What do you mean? Just sleds down the rest of the way?
No, he is not breathing, done, dead, gone.
So
you're in the middle of these stairs, and you're like, oh my God.
And dead to like you can't resuscitate him because it's like drowning. It's not like the heart just stopped. It's like
you watched it happen. You can certainly try to fix it, but it is not going to be easy, especially at his size. And so you, as quickly as you can, get him downstairs. But how quickly can you get that person down the stairs? Now they're at the bottom. Now you got to get them onto the stretcher, which again means lifting them, which is a not easy thing to do. They're on the stretcher, race to the back of them across this lawn. You try to intubate them, but the anatomy does not cooperate with you as someone who's that big. The clock is ticking. Somewhere in the back of your head, there is a tick, 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 tick saying, because time is brain. Every moment this person is not getting oxygen, their brain is dying. And shortly after their brain, like just behind their brain is their heart. And just behind their heart is their kidneys. Everything is dying. And it's all coming, like literally the entire universe is looking at you saying, this man is dying in your lap. This man is dying in your lap. This man is dying in your lap. And you're trying to get him in and you're trying to bag him because if you can ventilate him hard enough, you can actually force some of that fluid out, but it's not an easy thing to do. And then
especially the person much larger than you.
Especially the person much larger than you. And now you tell your partner, now I look at my partner and say, just go, just drive, let's go. But now you're doing this. Imagine trying to make a sandwich in the back of a U-Haul truck. It would be difficult. You don't know when the thing's going to turn, when it's going to stop, when it's going to speed up. So you're just getting thrown around. That's what an ambulance is. An ambulance is just a U-Haul truck with a stretcher in it. So you're getting tossed around. You're trying to bag this guy. It is a complete disaster. To me, those are the ones. I mean, I get tense just thinking about it because those are the patients that when you arrive, they're really, really acute, but they're alive. And just the act of trying to get them out of here there's a decent chance that this whole thing goes downhill and this person dies on you just in the act of trying to get them out of that house. It's a really scary thing to have to deal with. It's really, really scary.
I can't imagine. You know how in movies, it's not exactly a trope, but we've seen it in several movies. I can think of about 4 or 5 examples where a person gets basically, it's usually an impact, like an automobile impact, or they're pinned under a subway or between 2 trucks or something. I don't know if this is a fictitious thing from movies or if this happens where it's like, if we move these 2 objects, the person's going to die. Do you know the scenario I'm talking about? You probably seen the movies.
That's
like
really
somebody is like, you're alive. They're totally alert. They're talking to you. They're going like, oh, this can't happen. I've got season tickets and I've got, floor seats to the Knicks on, Friday night. And they're like all there, but that like, well, if we move these objects, they're the only thing keeping. Does that actually happen? Is that a thing or is that just?
That's a thing. I've never seen it with like 2 trains or whatever, but in a tunnel collapse, a guy who was buried almost up to his nipples in dirt. It was just sort of like maybe around rib level, tremendous, like huge pressure. Well, what happens is like all that, like most of your fluid is like been pushed to your top half. And now you've got multiple things happening, but it's almost like a tourniquet situation down below.
Right. No circulation down there.
Yeah. And toxins are building up and all that stuff. But all the pressure that exists that like we forget or we don't pay attention to, like, our body is essentially plumbing. So all that pressure that's rolling through your veins to keep you awake and alert and to keep your brain fed, it's all like essentially being like you're someone squeezing a balloon and the balloon's going, and it like hyperinflates the top half of the balloon. Well, if you let go of that, all that fluid is going to then just go back into its normal container. So you're going to essentially lose all of that fluid. It's all going to go crashing back down to the bottom. And that person, the minute you remove that person is going to pass out. Now you've got the other thing, which is like, what's been going on with all that blood that's been stagnant down there? Are there clots in there? What kind of what sort of toxins have built up in there? Have they been bleeding? Because if they've been bleeding, if there's an injury, which is where I think a lot of times you get those two buses that pin somebody together, or some big object, they bleed out. All that's left is the blood that's trapped into the upper third of their body. So if you let that go, it's going to drain down into that hole into the ground that all the rest of the blood fell out of.
That's just a not win. I mean, what do you do? And I mean,
It's not
how
a
you doing
winnable
that? It's like,
situation.
well,
It's not
like,
winnable. You
yeah.
fly out of
So, like,
service.
eventually, do we just wait around, let this guy have like 8, 9 good hours, tell a few stories, maybe buy some time for his wife and kids to say goodbye, or like, but if the inevitable, we got to move this, you can't just sew him up like a bag or something to keep everything inside. So,
No, you fly out a surgeon. I've seen them do that. They have a thing called ECMO now, which is actually like a giant heart and lungs. So all of your blood right now could just be drained off of you into a little machine, and then your lungs and your heart don't have to do a thing, and it'll beat for you, and it'll bring in oxygen for you, and it'll get rid of impurities for you, and it'll just bring it all back in. So they can do things like that to try to keep you going, but it's an incredibly complicated situation because of that reason, because
you can't stop the
theoretically.
breach. I mean, what do
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah, it's
wow.
tough.
Well, I kind of feel like we're on to the greatest hits now a little bit. So, can you share with me, because I'm just loving the stories. What is like the most bizarre event you've responded to? Just like, I thought I'd seen it all, but now, I mean, I mean,
So
I've heard from ER nurses about things stuck in anuses and things like that.
oh,
But
mhm,
yeah, but
mhm,
like,
mhm.
yeah, tell us some of the more bizarre.
So I get a call for a guy at a bus station. He is 45 feet from the front door of Atlanta's largest public hospital. It's Grady. It's a public hospital. It's a trauma center. It's a burn unit. It's a massive, massive hospital. He's 45 feet from the door, sitting at the bus station, and the call comes out for problem unknown at the bus station. And I got back on the radio and I said, "Dispatch, this guy's like 45 feet from the door of the biggest hospital in the state. Just tell him to get up and walk in." And they said, "I think you're going to need to drive out there." I said, "All right." So I go over, and that's not, by the way, not a thing that a dispatcher normally says, which is like, just go and you'll see. So we roll up and we walk over, and there's this guy sitting on a bus bench. And here's the weird thing. And you realize why it's so weird in a moment. All the other bus riders, all the other people who are waiting for the bus are just sitting patiently on their bench seats, which tells you how weird public transportation gets. So he's sitting there on the bus bench, and I look at him, and he keeps kind of rubbing his eyes, like rubbing his face a little bit. So I walk over and I was like, what is going on? And he had melanoma, which had become infected. He was frustrated with the hospital system. This is middle of July, Atlanta. Like, Atlanta's super hot. It is the bug capital. I mean, this is like a jungle here. There's bugs, snakes, everything. Middle of July, spends the night in the bushes with this huge infected open wound on his face. Flies descend on him, lay their eggs. By sunrise, he has thousands, and I mean thousands of maggots. And they have eaten the cancerous infected melanoma, which probably
Is
saved him.
helpful. Yeah, yeah, like,
But they
it's like
didn't
the old
stop.
leech concept.
Yeah, but they didn't stop there. They just kept going. And so they have eaten all of the left side of his face here, and his eye is like a big, it looks like it's the size of an egg. His eye is like this huge swollen, and it's all just maggots in there. And he keeps
So it's
rubbing.
like moving around.
Yes, his whole
It's
face is
like some
moving.
John Carpenter shit there.
His whole face is moving. And every time he rubs his eye, like 2 or 3 maggots are just like squeeze and fall out. And so I'm standing there, and he tells me the story about the melanoma. He tells me a story about the frustration. Tells me a story about having gone and slept in the bushes.
He obviously has no awareness of how bad he looks, right? At this point, or if
I
he were to pass a mirror, he'd probably pass out, right?
I I don't I don't I can't I honestly don't know how much he understood of his situation or how much he just didn't care of his situation. Um, but he and I were standing there talking, and I kept saying to him, "I can't leave you here." And he just said, "I'm not going back in that hospital." And of course, every time he keeps talking, he keeps doing this, and they're squirting out, and they're everywhere, and his whole face is writhing. And I'm trying to explain to buddy, they've eaten half your face. They're going to eat the rest of it. Like you are, like, as he's talking, I'm watching like muscles move and you can see teeth and they've eaten part of his ear. I mean, they're just eating his, and he's calm as can be talking to me, telling me he's not going anywhere.
I did
And
not know that maggots would eat live tissue. I thought they wanted, like,
they were just
carrion.
working his skin.
Mm.
And which, I mean, I have no idea how much of this was an infected mess before he slept in that bush. I don't know how big that thing was. I know only that at this point, it's like this is just roiling. And so I had to get a doctor to come out. And I said, you're going to have to maybe help me talk this guy into it. And so the doctor comes out pushing a wheelchair.
You might want put a little mint oil under the hood too.
And he stops. Well, no, don't do that. The problem with the oil, you can't wash the oil off and the smell sinks into it. So 3 hours later, like you still have the Noxema or whatever you put because it's hard to get like a petroleum-based product out. So that's still there. So the smell basically is still there. Every time I see people do that, I'm like, you're going to regret it. You're going to regret that. But the doctor comes out pushing a wheelchair and we talk this guy for a few minutes. He finally agrees. He sits down. We roll him in, and the whole way into the ambulance, or excuse me, the whole way into the hospital, these maggots keep falling off. All I could think of was each of those maggots is like, it's like they're like a tiny urn because each of them's filled with human being. You know, like that is him that they've been eating. And that as they're plopping on the ground along the way, I was like, my gosh, it's all these little urns that we're dropping along the way. How weird. I mean, I've seen burns and crazy trauma and people cut in half and all kinds of wild chainsaws and fall from roof and huge gun blasts, to be standing there face to face with a man who's, well, face to partial face with a
I
man
was going to say face to half face.
who's got hundreds, thousands maybe of maggots actively eating him. And while he's just having a rational, calm conversation, hands down the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, so it's hands down. So there's not even a close second.
Oh, I mean, look, there's so many.
All right, give me one more. Just while we're on the greatest hits, I don't want my producer to get mad at me. Like I should have just kept pumping that well.
So there's a guy, he's coming from Florida. He's on Highway 85. He is directly across the street from Turner Field, which is where the Braves used to play.
Oh, yeah.
He's hammered, driver's side windows down. My guess is he leans out the window to throw up. That's the only, I can't imagine why else he would have leaned out the window. He loses control of his car, runs into the median. When he does, he kind of like, however much he was leaning out of the window, he bounces further out. So now he's like waist up, he's out of the car.
Oh, God.
You know those utility poles that they
Yep,
have?
I know this. Yep.
At 85 miles an hour, he hits a utility pole. It rips him out, spins him around, and while it cracked him like a lobster. And so while it's spinning him around, his intestines are just sort of unspooling. And so he lands sitting up, weirdly enough, sitting upright, again, back against the median, looking at the southbound, sitting in the southbound lane. His intestines cover about the first 3 lanes of southbound traffic. So we pull up and he's all by himself. It's just a human being sitting against the median and intestines everywhere. And I'm like, I don't understand what happened here. Like, this doesn't look like a person hit by a car. What is he doing? And I look back at about 200 yards away in the northbound lane, I see a truck. So I said, all right, let me just go see. That's got to be his car, but let me just go see. There's this huge blood poof around that utility pole. So, I couldn't jump over the median wall because there was, let's just say 20-foot diameter circle of blood. So I walk about 25, 30 feet away to where I can jump the wall, and I jump over the median. And as soon as I land right there on the ground in the fast lane, or excuse me, in the shoulder of the northbound lane, is a heart.
No,
Full,
Jesus.
intact, like literally perfectly removed, just sitting there. And I stopped and I turned around to this cop and I said, hey, you might want to close off this lane at traffic. And he said, what? I said, because there's a heart over here. And everybody comes running over and they look. And sure enough, I mean, there is just this heart sitting in the northbound lane.
In the movie, it's beating. It was not beating. It was
not beating.
Okay. Oh, my God.
Beating.
Well, thanks for that.
Yeah.
It's just because my appetite. Well, you talk about three types of people who are involved in your field, and
Yeah.
so like, what is the difference between a death tourist, a true believer, and a killer? Which of these things are would you say characterize most people in the emergency field? But first, kind of walk us through death tourist, true believer, and a killer.
The tourists are people who are gonna be there for a short period of time. There are a lot of people, who arrive because they don't know where else to go, and it's, it's a respectable job that you could get with a clean driving record and a high school diploma. So, there are a lot of people who sort of end up there, and they aren't gonna be there for very long. Some of them are there to do something else. I knew a guy who was a landscaper, and because he owned his own business, he didn't have healthcare, so he became a medic just so he could run his landscaping business. So there are people like that who aren't gonna be around very long, and that tends to permeate their approach to the job, their approach to patients. They kinda have this hands-off, like, you guys are the professionals. I'm just here. I'm just doing a thing." Um, which affects patient care, it affects their partners, it affects everything. A killer, and there are also plenty of these around, are people who became really cynical, became really burned out, who became really angry. And there are a lot of people, I don't know that I can properly state just how angry some people in the field are. It doesn't pay super well. The hours are crazy. People tend to work more than one job. It's a really difficult job. It is very much a thankless job. And there are people who are really, really angry, and they take that anger out on their patients, and that leads to poor care, criminally poor care, where they will just deny things to their patients simply because it'd be less work not to treat them and just to drop them off at the hospital, or to convince them they don't need to go to the hospital, than it would be to do the right thing. And then you have the true believer is someone who was just born wanting to do this job, and there are a lot of those. There are a lot of people who know from a very young age, the only thing I wanna do is work on an ambulance or a fire truck. I wanna be in EMS, I wanna be in the fire service, that's all I wanna do with my entire life, and they know it. They know it from day one.
And service is the key word, I think. And so do you obviously tend closest to true believer. Would you consider yourself then a true believer?
Yeah, I entered in at 100% as a tourist, but then made the switch.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because harkening back to the beginning of our conversation when I was saying you just seem to have kind of like a childlike awe of like, God, look what these guys are doing. They're the calmest guys. They have all the answers. I want to be that guy. That sounded like a true believer to me.
I would say
Um,
that's more tourist. That's more tourist. You hit it at the end. At the very end there, when you mention the word service, that's where the true believer comes in. I think the tourist sees the lights and they see the sirens and they see all the cool stuff and they think, "Oh man, this is gonna be awesome." But the person who finds in themselves a desire to serve others, that's the true believer.
Wow. I know, I know from being a respite care provider that the burnout is real. We've talked a lot about compartmentalizing emotions and maintaining distance, but how do you balance emotional detachment and professionalism under such dire circumstances, day in, day out?
So again, I think it's almost you got to remember how young so many of us are. We enter this field, so I think a lot of the mistakes we make are mistakes of youth. But I had this patient one day, and you kind of have two selves. You have your street self, your normal self, and then you have your work self. Um, on the street, if somebody took a swing at me or spit at me or cussed me out, we'd be fighting. But in the ambulance, those are things that just happen, and you roll with it. The things you allow your patient to do to you, it's pretty, like you will surprise yourself,
So it's
and
code switching essentially.
100%.
Yeah.
And so I was very good at that. I think we all are very good at that. And one day we had a guy called all the time, always rude, always and rude doesn't quite cover it. Always a royal pain in the ass, huge jerk. There's just no other way. So he was just a mean, bitter guy. And I pick him up one day, and he says something to me. I don't remember what now. And it just caught me in my regular self. And I yelled back at him. So now the two of us are arguing in the ambulance. And after a couple seconds, I kind of go, "What what are you doing? Like, why are you, so I stop, and he winds himself down. And, now that I've done this, now that I've lost my temper, I'm a little bit embarrassed, but also feel like, okay, maybe we've broken through or something. So I said to him, I said, you call us, and you call us all the time. And every time you do, you're just mean. You're just rude. Why? Like, it doesn't have to be this way. And again, bear in mind, I'm 24 years old. I don't know shit about shit. I'm a 24-year-old kid. And he looks at me, this is a grown man. And he looks at me and he said, I have AIDS and I'm dying. And my family and friends have all left me. So I'm going to die alone. And it makes me angry. If you want to talk about being put in your place in a very real way, that's where I was that day. And so that to me is how I was able to compartmentalize without losing humanity. Because you remember, there is a saying, and it's such a cliche that, be kind. You don't know what someone else is going through. And it's so easy to say that, but my God, that's true. It really is true. And when you get reminded of it in such a heavy way, it sticks with you. At least it did with me.
It's just I'm inspired that you've managed to, maintain that much empathy. I just feel like this is a job that just keeps coming at you daily with just some of the
Mm.
most grisly, senseless trauma that you're forced to just sort of deal with and swallow. Working long hours, not really sometimes. I mean, don't you guys sometimes have to work like 10 days on and like, I mean, schedule wise, or is it well, like when I talk to the ER nurse, she's like, they have us work like 312s kind of thing, but they kind of sort of understand like we can't put a person through this all the time. Do they get a break? How does that work for you? I mean, does the establishment understand like, look, we have to empathize with our guys. We can't just have our paramedics, these men and women out that we have to give them. I mean, how does that work? Does anybody draw those boundaries for you, or can you just like, hey, extra shift, I need the money, I'll take it, or is anybody watching out for you? Is there? I guess that's kind of my question. Sorry, it took me a long way to get there. Is there somebody in the organization looking out for your mental health besides each other?
I don't think so. I think supervisors, many of your supervisors work the same job that you work. And, I knew that, and everybody I worked with knew that, and they had, to a degree, an understanding. But, once you were on the other side of the coin, your perspective changes and your focus changes. And at some point, from their perspective, like, we need trucks in the street. We need people answering calls. That's period. And I know that you're coming off the end, as we work 13 and a third. So you're coming off the end of your third 13 and a third in a row, night shift. But we have calls holding and there's no trucks coming in. And so you got to stay and you got to work. That is real. That happens all the time. And, public safety, money for more people, for more training, for more equipment, that comes from tax dollars. You find me the city that's eager to cough up tax dollars for the people working in ambulance. Um, I challenge you. It is really, the money's not forthcoming. And so if the people aren't there, if somebody calls out, or if staffing is just low at this particular period, or it's a crazy time of year, you're going to have to stay and run those calls. I mean, I have been, we've all been held over. You just want to go home. You're just desperate to go home. And then, you know, it's a busy day and a car wreck drops and a cardiac arrest drops and a shooting drops. And, then there's a 4-year-old having a seizure. And what are you going to do? You just going to like grab your bag and go home? I mean, you want to, and I certainly tried to, but, you're going to get held over.
Did you ever find yourself, just to kind of put this another way, I would imagine you had to have at some point, or how often did you find yourself in a position where you had the sort of self-awareness and wherewithal to say, "I really shouldn't be out here." Like, have you
Sure.
ever felt like you were out there and you were actually potentially a detriment more than a help?
Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is almost always a quiet day in an ambulance for whatever reason. it came at this time I was working Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights. So Thanksgiving's my last night. I'd
And
anticipated.
you're 13 of the third, so
Yeah. Yep.
40 hours, 3 days. Okay.
I'd expected it to be quiet. It had been busy the last 2 days. We got there and we just got slammed. We did not, it was all night. We never stopped moving. And because the previous day was Thanksgiving, I just didn't get a ton of rest because we had family coming over. It was just a thing. And 5 a.m., we get a call for a man having a heart attack, which is one of those calls, like you get a lot of chest pain calls. Some of them are real. You got to treat them all real. Some of them are real. A lot of them are not, but they
So
all.
the quickest way to get through triage in an emergency room is like,
So you
trouble breathing, because they will
Yep.
take that seriously right away. You can have an arm hanging off, and the guy with trouble breathing is going to go right in before you.
Sure, because
Yeah,
trouble breathing is going to kill him faster than the arm.
Yeah.
And so, we get this call and you're just like, oh my God, here we go. And you're just praying. I was praying. I was like, please don't let this be real. Please don't let this be real. Please don't let this be real. And we walked around the corner. I took one look at this guy and he was pale and he was sweating and he was short of breath and he was holding his chest in the way that I was hoping he was not going to be holding his chest. And he was nauseous. And I put him on the 12 lead and it looked ugly in a way that I was hoping it was not going to look ugly. And I remember sitting there and just thinking, I don't have the energy. Like it wasn't like I was burned out or something. I just physically did not have the energy. And I just sat down and I was like, I don't think I can, I was mentally worn out. I was physically.
What was the 12 lead? What is it you were supposed to be executing?
So, well, I did the 12 lead, but what the 12 lead is sort of a photograph that tells you whether there's something wrong. And one of the worst things you can find on the 12 lead is a thing called ST elevation. That we've all seen that heart tracing, right? You see it, it's like a thing all the time. Well, if the end of it, if it's elevated, if instead of coming down at the end, which it does, if you think how a tracing looks, if it stays up high, you're in real trouble. That person's having a big heart attack. And that's what I found. And I knew this guy needed a lot. He needed it right away and he needed it from me. And I did not have the energy to do it. Like literally, physically and mentally, I was gassed. I was done. And so I sat there for probably about 10 seconds staring at my shoes. And then I just got up and I just did it. I wet. But that was the only time where I ever thought, there was a moment where I thought, am I just going to like just stop, like roll on the floor? Like I didn't know, like I just didn't have the energy to literally lift a hand. I was the most tired I've ever been in my entire life.
But you did it.
Yeah.
God damn it. Hero. What part of, what part of paramedic culture do you think outsiders fail to grasp most often?
I think when I see it portrayed, I see this thing of like everybody's got a certain kind of patient that they're not going to let die. And, you always see people like pounding on someone's chest. No one's going to die in my shift and all this kind of, and that's not how anybody views it. What they want is what we were talking about earlier. They want to perform well. That's what nobody's going to allow happen on their shift. I'm not going to allow myself or my partner to drop the ball and fuck this up. That's what's not going to be allowed. This notion of like, everybody has a certain kind of call that sticks with them. And, I can't drive anywhere in the city. Literally, there's nowhere I can go in the city without saying, I ran this there, I ran that there. We don't have ghosts in every corner. We have memories in every corner. Some of them are good. I can laugh at a lot of them. Some of them are not good. But I don't know. There's this feeling that, and I think it's because people think like, oh, medicine, life and death. Oh, it's so serious. It isn't serious. And the reason I wrote my book, and when I say it isn't serious, I mean, we don't live it in that serious, overly earnest way every day. That's, that is just not like, earnest is not a thing that will get by on an ambulance. You will get kicked off in a hurry. Your partners will hate you if you're that kind of person. And a big reason that I wrote my book was this job has a very Coen Brothers Fargo aspect to it. And I just thought, where's that depiction? Where is where's the dark humor? Where are the two medics who are doing rock, paper, scissors in somebody's house at 7 a.m. because grandpa's dead on the floor and someone's got to go tell grandma that he died with a cucumber in his ass? Like, where is that version of this story? And that is, I think, the thing that people miss is they think it's this like really earnest, you got to be a special kind of person to do that. No, you don't. You just have to be willing to do it. You have to be willing to be in one after another, after another, after another of crazy situations and be calm enough to handle it.
And I don't think that's something you can explain to anybody. You're
Yeah.
sort of bound to your associates in that way. I don't think you can really explain. It's gonna turn a lot of people off if you say if you find some of these humor in this thing, and unless they've dealt with it, unless they
Mm-hmm.
have tasted or known the necessity to have that reaction to it, to frame it that way, which comes from a place of empathy. It's just your
Oh yeah.
like, yeah, your body is just that humor is a defense mechanism. It's like, if I just take this in sympathetically right now, it'll kill me. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? I'll freeze
Yep.
up and I can't do this. And so, like, it's tough for you because I think that, like, not everyone's gonna get the mordant humor, as they called it in the review. I think that
Mhm.
you probably did your colleagues definite service in writing the book. What was the reaction from readers? Did you get that kind of reaction? Did people are like, "This guy's a psychopath. He's laughing at," you know,
I that book came out, gosh, 9 years ago now.
uh,
I get emails every day. People
it
writing to me
it's an
saying,
evergreen. I didn't care. Jason's like, "Well, this book came out. I don't care. This is, I mean, I wanna know about this guy's job,"
yeah,
so
people reach out to me constantly to say, they worked in a different city, in maybe not a city, different state, different country, um, and yet they had the same experience that I did. And to know that have someone reach out and say, "Man, like, I was able to give this to my wife, and for the first time in 15 years, she understands what the job is. I was never able to explain it. You explained it. Thank you." Or I was really burned out, and reading your book reminded me of why I do this, or it validated this weird job that I have that none of my friends understand and that my husband doesn't think pays enough, but which I get so much out of, and I can't imagine living without. I To read your account validated for me what it is that I do, and I do think that is a huge part of it. For all the humor, and I'm with you. That was one of the things that people, that I do get frustrated at, is when people, they kind of get like, "Oh, well, you're an adrenaline junkie," which I hate that phrase, or "You're cold." My favorite call to run is an 87-year-old woman at 11:30 at night who's just lonely, who just wants someone to sit at the kitchen table
mhm.
and eat a slice of lemon meringue pie and talk because her husband's dead and her son lives in Oregon. That's the best call you can possibly, because it's just two people having a quiet conversation, and I've never met anyone in the business who wouldn't relish that call. Those are great. It's just human connection. It's just you're sitting down and you're talking with somebody, and I don't know, if that doesn't move you, then you're not a human. And so when people don't get the humor, I can roll with that. But to say like, "Oh, it's product of you guys being cold," That's where I get defensive, because, no, the people who do this job are not cold. They are some of the kindest people you ever meet. They might not,
That you
I
can
used
even
to say,
talk to me like, I mean, you're an extraordinary dude that you can even talk to me like this at this point, and still that's such a nice story about the loneliness that level of empathy would still be awake in you and had just been bludgeoned to death by the cruel senselessness and violence of the universe. Just, you know what I mean? Just over
"Yep.
and over and over. It's inspiring to me. I mean, my last question for you gonna be, and you kind of answered it in many ways, but has life as a paramedic change the way you view the fragility of life, like
Oh,
philosophically,
yeah.
and you're
Yeah. It is, God, is so fleeting. Every time I ran a dead body and, would, like, reach into their back pocket and pull out a wallet to get their ID and write down their name, their birthday, and you're looking at the photo of this person, which in some cases, until you saw the photo, you didn't know what they looked like. Um, and I would think, "Oh, your family doesn't know. Like, your friends, everybody who loves you has no idea that you're dead. I know. I don't even know you. I'm a stranger, and I'm the only person on earth who knows you're dead. You woke up this morning, like, your shoes are tied, your wallet, your keys, it's all here in your pocket, like, you had plans." I ran a guy who was on his way to a convention, and he just dropped dead on his way to a convention. He still had that little convention tag around his neck. Like people have planes and we're on our way to do things, and it just like it ends that quickly. It is fragile, and it my God, like just life can be short and it can be brutal. So whatever it is that makes you happy, be that version of yourself, because the end is coming for all of us, and you're not going to expect it. It's just going to arrive when it arrives.
Word. He is Kevin Hazzard. He is the author of 1,000 Naked Strangers, A Paramedic's Wild Ride to the Edge and Back. That has been the subject of our conversation today, but I urge you to pre-order Kevin's forthcoming book, No One's Coming, which drops, I believe, on March 3rd. So go to your local, I mean, if you must, you could go to Amazon, but I recommend calling your local indie bookstore and pre-ordering that. Kevin, thanks so much for renewing my faith in humanity. That's why I do this show. That's why it's called A Fresh Face in Hell. Thank you for being our fresh face in hell this week, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.